More messenger RNA vaccines are coming, whether you like it or not. Moderna has just been given over $100 million to develop a bird flu vaccine in case there were to be a pandemic with high casualties. Moderna says that they're going to use the money to do more safety studies, and I sure do hope that they're able to do more than before the last vaccine was released. So let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. I'm a board certified pediatrician in Tampa, Florida. Have certainly made a lot of work and my knowledge known about messenger RNA vaccines during the COVID vaccine, where I was fortunate to be able to present in front of the FDA to explain what my concerns were and the plead for transparency. Of course, that didn't really take place, but I guess we always have another shot. Now, of course, messenger RNA, which is a completely different form of vaccine, which, if you remember, messenger RNA was what the vaccine itself was. It would be injected, it would be moving into the cells, it would be creating the protein that in that case was the spike protein, which would then supposedly would be staying on the cell surface where the immune system would react and create an immune reaction that would give us immunity. Now, today we're going to be talking about how there are other vaccines, including this one for the bird flu that is going to be researched. We're going to talk about what that funding is used for, what concerns are about messenger vaccines overall, including what happened with COVID, and what might be done differently, hopefully, right? Now, in terms of what is this funding? So actually, it's well over $100 million. $169 million is what the grant was from the Department of Youth and Home of Health, the Department of Health Human Services, the DHHS. Now, there's actually two. So as you may know with influenza, it's a little different than COVID. There's an H protein, there's an N protein. And so if you remember, like when there was swine flu back when that happened, that was, I believe, an H1N1. Bird flu was H5N1. And there's also an H7 bird flu that's out there. Okay. Is this a problem? Right now, no. You probably have been hearing, and of course I've done some videos about the bird flu and what's happening so far. But as of right now, at least, there's no evidence that the bird flu can be spread easily from human to human like regular flu does. That does not mean that there can't be a mutation that may potentially make that happen in the future. But worldwide, since bird flu has been known, about 50% of people who have contracted it have died. Now, that does not seem to be happening with the sporadic cases that are happening in America so far, but worldwide, historically, it's 50% of people have died if they've caught it, okay? As a point of reference for COVID, it's under 1%. Okay, so of course, if we do start to hear that like half of the people who catch any virus, I guess for that matter, yeah, I can understand why there would be a very fast rush to wanting to create a vaccine to prevent 50% death if that actually were to happen. Okay, now it should be pointed out, though, that there already is a bird flu vaccine that's been developed using the old technology. So regular flu vaccines, the antigens are grown inside typically like a chicken cell, and so the virus is grown in there. It's an inactivated form that they then are able to take the particles from there. That's what's put into the vaccine. That's what creates the immune response. That's the way most vaccines, not all necessarily grown in a chicken cell, but that's kind of an egg cell. But that's kind of the way that they're typically done. There's usually not this messenger RNA that then tells the body to make the protein that you're going to react and have an immunological benefit from. Benefit being that your body has immunity. But and already there's been an order for 4.8 million doses from the U.S. federal government has already been placed. That's in the process of being made, just in case there were to be the switch over. Okay, so why would that be? Obviously, if they're making it now, and I realize that there are people out there who don't get flu shots either, but it is fair to say that the research and the amount of time spent studying it, both in the acute as well as like the follow-up phases, has been much more done with flu vaccine than there ever was with COVID, even up until this point. 4 years after it first started to come out. Now, why would they want to do it as messenger RNA? Well, I understand why. It's faster to make. Also, it's much more flexible. So let's say that it turned out that it was an H6, making that up completely, as the protein, and that this H5 or H7 doesn't do anything. They can very quickly, in a matter of weeks, create a messenger RNA vaccine against the H6 or against whatever. And so that is an advantage, of course, other complications and concerns, which I'll talk about in a second. But that is what the advantage of messenger RNA vaccines are: fast and flexible. Now, the last messenger RNA again for vaccine for COVID. Now, at the time, of course, there was no previous research available. It was something that was brand new. These vaccines were brand new, had never been given to humans before in any large amount. And of course, there were the studies that would come up, but of course, a lot of the studies didn't show things such as the myocarditis, which is now very well known to be a not common, but certainly a possible side effect from the messenger RNA COVID vaccine. Nobody questions that, but that wasn't caught in the studies before the vaccine started to be given to millions of people. They didn't find it when thousands of people were getting it. Now, as far as that also, I mean, let's face it, when the vaccine first came out, it worked. We did see a very significant drop in death, in hospitalization, especially for the people who were at the most high risk, which we've talked about. So, people can express concerns about the vaccines, but I think in terms of did it do the original job that it was set out to do, it did. It did. But of course, what have we seen since they started coming out with the boosters? Not nearly the same level of success. The protection time has been measured in the order of months, sometimes even weeks. After a person gets a COVID vaccine, the boosters, it's starting to wear off, and within a few months, it's felt that the protection's not even there anymore. And yes, there are people who are out there who are getting a flu shot every 4 months or something like that, which is not what's recommended by the government, by the way, but that does happen. But of course, one would think that if you're going to take a vaccine, it's for long-term immunity. You're looking, if you're going to do it, you're doing it to protect yourself. But obviously, it's not nearly as attractive if it's only good for a few months. Now, also, one of the big things that's different now, and also why one can start to question, even though, to be clear, the U.S. government does now recommend an annual booster COVID vaccine shot. That's not what I'm advocating for, but that's what the policy is for the U.S. government. Now, of course, one thing that wasn't ever taken into consideration with the vaccines, because there was no natural immunity, is, of course, now almost everybody, well over 95%, probably much higher than that, have had COVID. So people now have natural immunity. So, of course, if they have that long-term immunity, we've talked in the past of the clear advantages of natural immunity, the way it is on the nasal lining, that it's in the lining and not just in the blood, because that's what IgG antibodies are, as opposed to IgA antibodies that are on the lung tissues and on the nasal passages. When a person gets the wild disease, there's many different proteins on the COVID virus that is an immune system can be mounted, response can be mounted to for immunity. Whereas with the vaccines, it was only the one spike protein. So there's a more broad immunity that happens when a person gets it as well, gets in the natural state as well. So, of course, that's an issue, but it is also to be important. People are still getting long COVID from the disease, but it doesn't seem to be happening as much. Okay. Now, I do want to also point out, lots and lots of people who did take the COVID vaccine didn't have any problems. I've shared before that I did not have it with any of the first series. I have chosen not to be getting the boosters after I had COVID and had my immunity and keeping up with my vitamin D and zinc levels and my immune protocol, which I've shared here before. But a lot of people did do fine with it. And of course, people don't hear it, get on the news and say, oh, I did fine. You only hear about the side effects from it. And the side effects are real. Okay, I'm not downplaying it, but it's not like every person who got the COVID vaccine has a side effect. Now, of course, a lot of people with the COVID vaccine, the messenger RNA, got side effects similar to the way that we do often see with other vaccines: high fevers, local swelling, flu-like types of symptoms, etc. And so, that kind of thing probably wouldn't be surprising. But we started learning about other things. As I mentioned, the myocarditis, pericarditis, that was something really new, never seen with any vaccine before. It is pretty clear that it's there. But also the triggering of autoimmunity, Guillain-Barré, other types of hyperinflammatory conditions that seem to be happening for some people with the vaccine. But of course, that does also happen with the wild virus as well. It's not only happening in the vaccine, and that's part of the pro versus con, or weighing the two sides that people should do when they're weighing it all out. Now, what are the concerns about messenger RNA vaccines in general, and why this may be something that hopefully they're going to take into consideration? So, when you give somebody a regular shot, the amount of antigen, the thing that their body's going to mount the immune response to, it's standard. You know exactly what it is. How much is in there? With messenger RNA vaccines, however, it's variable as to how much spike protein in the case of the H5 that would be in the flu vaccine. It's not known how much you're going to make. So a person may be more efficient making more of the antigen that more of an immune response could be to, potentially making more hyperinflammatory conditions, whereas other people may not make as much, and so they don't mount as strong of an immune response, which again could potentially be less side effects to it. Okay, so that was one thing. We were also told at the beginning that when you gave the person the vaccine, it would then be, once the mRNA was made, it would screw into and lodge into the lining of the cell that it was that took it up, and it would stay there. And we now know that that's not true. We know that spike protein itself has been found in the bloodstream of people. It's been found in organs that was distal from the site of where the vaccine was given. So that information either wasn't known or it wasn't shared with us, but that is information that we now know it is there, and that certainly would be a concern with any other vaccine as well. Now, also, I know that there are people who have been expressing concern about the lipid nanoparticles themselves. So, if you remember, the messenger RNA itself was wrapped in these nanoparticles of fat lipids that were then able to pass through the membrane of the cell to get inside the cell in order for the messenger RNA to be turned into proteins, like the spike protein in that case. But there are people who are concerned because the lipid nanoparticles, and there have been some studies where it can cause immunological or inflammatory reactions. Now, I actually did a pretty comprehensive search about this this weekend in preparing for it, and I know people are expressing concern. I found just a couple studies. One was a rat study, one was a human, but I didn't find a lot of research supporting that this was a problem. But none the fact it's a concern if they haven't studied it, which I didn't see that it was studied to be safe. I didn't see anybody injecting nanoparticles without the messenger RNA to see if there would be a reaction to that. That seems that would be kind of an easy study for people to do if they really wanted to see what people were reacting to. Maybe they don't want to know, right? That's always possible too. But also, we should be clear that, while that causes an immunological reaction, a vaccine causes an immunological reaction, an inflammatory reaction. That's how you get immunity. Same thing is also true with the wild virus. So to think that there won't be some type of inflammatory response to the vaccine, of course there's going to be. You can't create the immune response. You can't make the antibodies and immunity without having some inflammatory response. So now the question comes to, will they do anything differently? This is not being developed during a pandemic, which means that there is the opportunity to do things differently. And first of all, because they're not going to be seeking an emergency authorization, they're starting to do the research now. They don't have the same excuse where we're going to push it out really fast and bypass the traditional methods of safety that are done for vaccines that typically take years and years as opposed to months to be developed. Will they hold to that? We'll see. If it goes through the much larger vetting process and the much larger studies, etc., like that, I think some people will be more comfortable with that, and that's the way it should be done. Again, we were in the middle of a pandemic where people were dying. That's the reason why they had the emergency authorization. I hope that they will do more research about what happens, not just for the first couple days or hours after a vaccine, but longer term for inflammation, 3 to 4 months out, maybe even longer, checking to see if there is if there are new conditions that are being developed in those months that were seen after, compared to the months that were done before the vaccine. I hope that they measure how much flu of antigen that's made by the messenger RNA, so flu protein, shows up in the blood and shows up in the tissues. They now know that this does exist. Will they do research on this ahead of time as part of the safety process and figuring out what's actually happening with the vaccine? Will they be transparent? Will they put all of the information out there to people? Will they be willing to say, we don't know the answer to this yet, but we want to find out? That's what my presentation about the Pfizer vaccine to the FDA authorization committee was in the first place. If you are not transparent, if you're not saying this is what we know and this is what we don't know and it's a process, you're going to lose people. I realize there'll probably be a lot of people lost because of what's happened with the COVID vaccine in the first place, but I also do feel that if they were more transparent about the information they had, there may not have been as much pushback. Of course, people would have seen the reactions if they did develop one, and that's one thing. But really, again, going through that longer process, that more general authorization process, approval process, I should say, hopefully would take care of that. But of course, time will tell. All right, so if there is any more information about this or about bird flu itself becoming more problematic, of course, I will post it here. I've made lots of other videos that's on the channel here about vaccines, so please check them out. And of course, if anybody has any further questions, wants to do an educational consultation, we're here as part of Dr. David MD to do those no matter where in the world you are. Have a great day.